There would be no tears for him, no one left who cared whether he lived or died. He believed that his greatest crime was to be born poor. This was the fate of so many people in his world, and now he would die a violent death at the hands of his oppressors. There would be no sympathy. He doubted he deserved any. No escape. No more chances to make a run for it. He had only tried to live. He had explained to doubters that, like any revolutionary action, there was bound to be collateral damage. People got hurt. You had to take from those who had by force, because otherwise life gave you nothing. He'd always known that if he were caught, there would be a price to pay, and that time was now. As he sat on the ground, shackled to the wall, he knew that hope was a luxury he could no longer allow himself. Darkness was his friend. As soon as the light came, so would the soldiers. There was no real feeling of, what have I done? Or of remorse. More an acceptance of defeat. He had lost, and the strong had won. Was it ever any different? And now they would make him pay. They would strip him naked and make him bleed, and he would die slowly in excruciating pain. Bravery is only for winners, he thought bitterly, as thoughts of his imminent fate refused to reside at the back of his mind. What an irony, he thought. We spend so much energy in staying alive, but death would be a welcome friend. That's all he had to look forward to. But that, of course, was the real problem. Aside from all the stress and agony of having to wait for the beating and the execution, there was the terrible fear of the unknown. If the religious people were right, and there was an afterlife, he dreaded what might await him. Panic was setting in. Nothing and no one can save me now, he thought. My chances are all used up. He wished he had something to dull the pain, something or someone to give the slightest breath of comfort. Instead, he just sat and waited. I can't imagine how awful it must be the night before being executed, especially if you do not have faith in God. Faith will allow endurance and the knowledge that once the deed is done, Christ awaits. We're not entirely sure as to the crimes of the two men who were crucified with Jesus. The gospel writers call them criminals, not specifying the crime, and others call them thieves. It was not unknown at all for the Romans to crucify poor people or slaves in the colonies for any and every crime, if it suited them. However, in this instance, it's possible, or even likely, that these guys had been involved in a revolt, perhaps part of the gang of Barabbas, the rebel leader who Pilate freed instead of Jesus. As in the world today, you are much more likely to be crucified if you were poor, that is, executed if you were poor. Citizens of Rome were more likely to be beheaded or strangled. In any event, the punishment was horrendous and long and drawn out. It was intended to cause the maximum pain and maximum humiliation. One of the reasons that Jesus was likely executed with the two rebels or thieves was to identify him with the rebellion that had caused so much trouble, to attribute to him the offenses of those who stood up to the regime, and to show people what happened to them. Over the years, I find it more and more difficult to think too much about that day, Good Friday. The cursing and spitting and beating and humiliation that the creator of the universe endured, rejected and alone, broken and battered, quoting scriptures on the cross through painful short breaths, and asking his Father why he had been forsaken. It's really rather heartbreaking. What did God the Father cry out at the time? Even in his last hours, when physically he was a wreck, Jesus managed to have an immense effect on some of the people he came into contact with. As we mentioned yesterday, Pilate was slow to condemn him as just another criminal, because he knew he wasn't. And he saw something extraordinary in Jesus. We read that a Roman soldier who had seen it all, battles, executions, riots, murder, and mayhem, is moved to exclaim, "Surely this man was the Son of God." Whether he meant that statement in the way we understand it or not, does not take away from the fact that he saw something extraordinary in Jesus. That he somehow knew that this was not just another day and another death. Finally, the two co-convicted with Jesus are hoisted onto their crosses to share a similar fate. It seems that in this final relationship between Jesus and the men who will die with him, that it encapsulates the different reactions that people had when they encountered him. One of the thieves joins in with the mockers, who are having a field day berating and humiliating Jesus. It seems nearly extraordinary that he's so twisted and bitter that he would prefer to align himself with the people who are killing both Jesus and him. He refuses to see, or maybe because of bitterness, he cannot see what is actually going on. We all have to be careful that we don't allow the hard things in life, and life does hard things to us sometimes, that we become bitter. Sometimes the only choice we have is how to react to pain when we can't change the circumstances. The other guy has been watching and listening, and through his pain, he hears Jesus ask his Father to forgive those who are putting them all to death. He can see the difference between them, the innocent and the guilty. He drops any pretense of arrogance or bitterness and acknowledges his sin and asks for help, for mercy. Remember me when you come into your kingdom. It may be very late in the day, and everyone else may have made jokes about Jesus being a king, sticking a crown of thorns on his head and a robe on his back, and pretending to bow. But this guy gets it. Jesus really is a king, and so he asks for entrance to the kingdom. The reaction of Jesus is not judgmental, or we'll talk about it on the other side, or it's not qualified in any way. It is instant mercy and salvation. This is the way of the kingdom of God. It hasn't changed either. The cross of Jesus, the whole Easter story, asks us the same questions about belief. Do we, like the religious leaders of the day, the Roman regime, the doubters, the hecklers, and one of the thieves, reject Jesus and reject his invitation to life in the kingdom through unbelief or bitterness? Or do we, like the other thief, acknowledge that we too are wrongdoers who cannot save ourselves and reach out to him for mercy? I believe with all my heart that Jesus' reaction to all who do is the same now as it was then. Come to me. Come join me in the kingdom. Maybe you will consider the question as you listen to Verna sing this song.
I hear the Savior say, Jesus died.